for a long time now. Now we're live. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Food Talk Live. A reminder that this episode will also appear on our podcast, Food Talk with Danny Nierenberg. And before I introduce someone who I admire very much, President Teresa Romero from UFW, I want to talk about the real opportunity we have right now because of the pandemic to grow the labor movement in a really significant way in the United States. I think that there has never been a time really in our history where the connections between safety and the safety of workers, farm workers, and food workers has never been so realized by eaters and consumers. There's not been this time in history before. And if we don't protect the workers who make it possible for us to eat every day, then we will never have a food supply that is safe, healthy, and nourishing for everyone. So we at Food Tank see the labor movement as a real ally in the fight for better protection and safety standards, of course, but also for better food for us all. We forget when we talk about the pandemic or climate change or any of the issues that Food Tank covers, that food is meant to be this joyous experience. And it should be, for everyone. And food should be part of our economic system that is honored and respected. Those who grow our food, those who harvest and process it, those who deliver it, everyone who's part of the food system should really be listened to and respected. So again, that's why I am so excited to have President Teresa Romero, who is the first Latinx woman immigrant president of the United Farm Workers. Before she became president, she had a lot of experience in fundraising, field organizing, legal affairs, and much, much more. President Romero, such an honor to have you. I couldn't be more thrilled.
Thank you very much, Annie, for having me here. It's an honor for me to be here with you. And these are important times. You're right. We're talking about how our food comes to our table. And sometimes we do not think of the people who are really harvesting it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm wondering, before we sort of dive into questions, if you can give a brief history of the United Farm Workers, where you're located, what you do, how the organization, how the union really formed.
It was at the beginning of the 1960s when Cesar Chavez realized that it was the issues that he personally had experienced were happening around the country. And he realized that there was a big need to have somebody, a labor union representing farm workers. We have to understand that farm workers in the 1930s were specifically excluded from the right to organize, right, from overtime pay, from workers' comp coverage. So they were doing very important, very difficult work, but they were not seen as the essential workers that they are. And he started a movement. He did not just start a union because he knew that there was a lot of needs in the farm worker family. They needed clinics, they needed loans, they needed legal support. So he really started a movement.
Right.
And, today, we continue to do that work. We continue to understand because the struggles continue. Even though we have made a lot of progress, sometimes you take 2 steps forward and 1 back. So it is something that we need to continue to do because we need to understand that without the farm workers, we don't have food on our table.
We just don't. We don't have food without farm workers. And the fact that UFW is able to continue the legacy and the movement that Cesar Chavez started is so inspiring to me personally. I think it's kind of ironic that now farm workers are called essential because we've tried to dismiss them for so many years and say they're not essential and we don't need better immigration policies and we don't need to support them. Do you think that now that so many folks, consumers know where their food comes from and understand because of COVID how essential these workers are, that the perceptions around them will change, that they'll gain more of that respect that I talked about before, that they'll gain more pay, that companies will step up to the plate?
Many consumers are great supporters of farm workers. We have experienced it through the years. When we go back to the Great Boycott, we know that consumers really understand. Maybe we need to engage the entire food supply chain.
Sure.
It is ironic that after so many years now, farm workers are considered essential, but unfortunately, they're not treated as such.
Right.
So we need to, yes, bring awareness, but not just to consumer, to restaurants, to elected officials. We have an administration that has demonized immigrants.
Right.
But we need to understand that in the fields, probably 95% of the farm workers are immigrants.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know that UFW is currently pushing for support of the Heroes Act, and I'm wondering if you can talk about what kinds of a specific support that farm workers need right now.
Farm workers, what we had found is that outside of the collective bargaining agreements that we have, farm workers are not informed, at least here in California, of their rights. We were able to work with Governor Newsom and include farm workers in paid sick leave. Just think about it. It doesn't make sense, even to protect all of us. If
Right.
we have a farm worker that tests positive or has the symptoms, but at the same time has a family to support, for the most part, is not going to isolate himself. Is not
Right.
going to stop working. They live day to day, paycheck to paycheck. So if we have a person that is infected in the field, it is not fair for him or her, and it's going to affect all of us. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we have um, paid sick leave for farm workers throughout the country. We cannot
Absolutely.
include some people and exclude others. And even here in California, where they're included, they're not informed. We have made a lot of efforts to inform workers not under contract of what the rights are. And in many cases, when they are positive for COVID, they are fired. So it is just a vicious cycle. They
Absolutely.
have protection equipment. We have been providing masks, as many as we can. One of our sister organizations, the UW Foundation, has been able to secure 800,000 masks
Wow.
that we're going to be distributing to farm workers throughout California and Washington State. But we need to do more. These are the people that feed us.
Absolutely. And can we talk about the reasons that they're not informed of their rights? Why do the companies and the contracts keep this from them? And is it because of language barriers? Because a lot of these folks, as you mentioned before, are immigrants from other countries.
Yes, but they're able to inform, and they have people in management that have Spanish-speaking people.
Sure.
That would be an excuse. I think what they don't want to do is pay people the sick leave, 2 weeks of sick leave, um, which is, to me, it's I cannot even comprehend it. We have people that are experienced. Farm workers. Many people consider them labor work, manual work. Anybody can do it. That
Sure.
is absolutely not true. Farm workers are professional. They
Right.
work from crop to crop, and they understand what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, and how. So to me, having that experienced labor force and not wanting to take care of it just because they want to save money, they don't want to pay the workers, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned the sort of professional part of farm work. People think it's very easy, but I dare anyone to go out on a summer day like it is in Baltimore today, 98 degrees plus, and do the work that these professionals do. And you're right, they have to have particular skills that they brought from the countries that they came from or that they learned here in the United States. It's a very technical job, and you have to be very precise in a lot of ways when you're doing this work.
And like I said, they go from crop to crop, so they understand a variety of crops.
Right.
And this in the 90s, where you are, there are some areas here in California that today is over 105.
Right.
And I dare any of us, I can tell you that I could not do it. I dare any of us to go and work in the field under these temperatures, bending over all day long on your knees, and not being able to stop. It is just, um, we cannot do it. We
Yeah.
don't understand it. We cannot do that profession.
Absolutely. And again, you're right. They go from crop to crop. It's not just one crop they have to become a professional in. It has to be a variety of crops. So
Yes.
these, just the knowledge base that a lot of these farm workers have on not just harvesting food, but also how growing it and growing conditions. There's a lot of knowledge there. These are not people who, come with no knowledge. They're really smart about what they're doing. And I think that's the stigmatization of immigrant farm laborers. I'm hoping we can talk about that. They're stigmatized, and real racism goes on in fields where these workers are working. And if you can talk about that and the impact it has.
We talk to farm workers, especially after the pandemic. We have been in constant contact with farm workers, and they say, "How is it possible that we are considered essential, but we're not treated as such? Any other profession, the medical profession, who are doing
Right.
amazing work and keeping us all safe as much as possible and keeping people alive, and they deserve whatever extra pay, whatever extra consideration they
Sure.
deserve it. But also farm workers, and because they are undocumented, many of them, because they don't speak the language, because, like I said, especially in this administration, we have been demonized and talked about as if we were just criminals and we do not contribute to the economy,
Right.
which is a falsehood. We do not commit the majority of the crimes. We do not, farm workers are not here bringing drugs. Farm workers are working very hard to feed us all, to support their family. They are a part of their community. They contribute to their community.
Absolutely.
So, these are very important moments that our country is living. Like Black Lives Matter, it's something to us, for us, that their struggle is our struggle. Without the civil rights movement that Dr. Martin Luther King, worked so hard for and died
Sure.
for,
Sure.
we would not have the opportunities that we have right now. So our struggles go hand in hand, and we need to understand that the color of our skin or the place that we come from doesn't define us.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think what we've seen happen over the last several months with Black Lives Matter and other demonstrations and uprisings going on, it is one struggle for equality in the United States, and that needs to be realized. And the fact that our food system, continues to be so unequal. So, it's also, ironic to me that farm workers are often some of the in the United States. There's a lot of food insecurity going on among these very hardworking folks, even though they're picking the food that the nation eats. What sort of resources does your union provide to help workers during this time and when there's not a pandemic?
What we have been always doing is I mean, it's ironic, like you said, they harvest the food that we eat, and sometimes they don't even have food on their tables.
Right.
Currently, because of this pandemic and because of family members that may not work in agriculture are not working, we have uh, partnered with Chef Jose Andres and the UFW and the UFW Foundation, and we have distributed over 100,000 meals. So this is something that we're doing because we know what the need is, and we try to reach out to others who are interested in doing something for farm workers. We are having either Zoom sessions or Facebook sessions, trying to inform them of their rights. We are using the technology because that's right now is the safest way of doing it.
Sure.
But like I said, we're going to be distributing masks that our sister organization, the UFW Foundation, was able to get donated. And although for many may not be a lot, for farm workers is a lifeline. And if they
Absolutely.
don't know what their rights are, they will never be able to speak up and defend themselves. Now, the fact that many of them don't do it is because they're undocumented. They don't want any problems. They know that want to feed their family, and even asking for their rights, they're afraid of.
And can you talk about some of the, I know that a lot of harassment goes on in fields. There's sexual harassment, there's other kinds of harassment, there's, what essentially is threats for these undocumented folks. Can you talk about what it's like to be a farm worker in the United States, especially during this administration?
Farm workers are very loyal to the work that they do. If you go in the fields, you're going to find farm workers that have been there for 30, 40 years. And they become leaders in their farm, in their field, because they know, especially if they're in the union contract, they know what needs to be done. There are tremendous abuses. There are farm workers who are not getting paid,
Right.
everything that they work for. There are farm workers. We have a case, we've been working with dairy workers in the state of Washington because we have found a tremendous amount of abuses in sexual harassment, rape. And I'm talking
Sure.
about rape of men and women.
Okay.
And when you have dairies, employers who are now willing to come to the table and sit down with us and trying to find a solution, it is just mind-boggling to me that they don't care about human beings. That all they do is deny it, and they think that that is solving the problem. We have had cases where workers, men, and mostly men, in a couple of dairies have filed lawsuits, even though it was very difficult for them because that's a
Sure.
stigma. You were raped
Sure.
by another man. It was very difficult, but they were brave enough to do that, and we continue to work with the dairy industry to make sure, the dairy industry, they're very segregated, they're very large
Mm-hmm.
farms, hundreds of
Mm-hmm.
thousands of animals. It is even more difficult for them to have communication with somebody that can help them. So we are very engaged with dairy workers in Washington. The stories that you hear from them are just devastating and infuriating.
I'm sure. Teresa, how can we hold these companies, these factory farms in Washington, these produce farms in other parts of the country? How can we hold them accountable for these kinds of abuses?
One of the things that we need to start doing is changing the laws. And sometimes even the laws in the books are not the laws in the fields. Our farm worker is supposed to get paid, and sometimes they don't get paid.
Right.
But to me, the best way of protecting farm workers is having union representation.
Sure.
And it doesn't mean that we're going to just go. We can change the way that we do things. When Caesar started the union, there was nothing but a confrontation, and
Right.
and there was no trust, and there were, we had five farm workers that were killed back then because they were supporting the UFW. They were assassinated, and nothing
Right.
ever happened. So right now, there's an opportunity for us to come to the table, find solutions, and have a union representation, but also have the workers' voice heard. If the workers are heard, nobody knows better what's happening in the fields
Right.
than the farm workers. And they're the ones that could come up with many solutions. But they also need to be, they have representation. And the farm workers that have union representation are respected, have benefits, have medical pension. I mean, they have a lot of benefits. And that's why some of them have been in the union for so many years,
Sure.
because they feel the protection.
Absolutely. And you've seen in your work that companies have come, they've come to the table, they've changed their minds, they've decided to, work with more union members of the union. That's a real strength now that so many companies have changed.
I think it is. There's still a lot of them that are refusing, they're the old school, but we need to move forward. If we just think of what happened in the past, um, there's a lot of things that they did wrong that they probably just want to leave in the past. Let's move forward. Let's move to a place where we can collaborate, and we have found, and we have done it in some of our contract companies with amazing results, not only for the union and the workers, but the employers. Their production quality improves, the workers'
Right.
compensation rates go down. I mean, there's many benefits that we can produce if we come together.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think that's a really strong point to keep emphasizing that when you have workers who are unionized, you know, there might be an increase in pay for those workers, but you're saving on all of these other things. You know, you'll have less turnover, as you mentioned, lower production costs. You won't have to keep teaching a new, you know, new folks who come in how to do the same job. There's so much that it really incentivizes people to stay on. And if you have those workers, then they tell their friends, you know, and it just becomes this, you know, sort of more virtuous circle or virtuous cycle of keeping good people on staff.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, there's so many things that we can do better. We have like in several of our country companies that work through collaboration, where even if there is a disagreement, even if there is something that a grievance, we come to the table and we try to figure out. We don't even involve the attorneys and say, this is a problem, how can we solve it?
Right.
99.9% of the time we have been able to solve it when we sit at the table. And from that, improve so it doesn't happen again with other workers. It is a win-win situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of companies in the past looked at organizing as a threat instead of a benefit. And I mean, I think it's clear that, you know, when workers are given the opportunity to organize and, you know, act collectively, that they can make real change that benefits not only themselves but the companies and the economy.
And you know what? A lot of people attack labor unions as if we were the enemy.
Right.
But I think the reason, you know, I don't think, I know that the reason workers have living wages and have benefits and have respect and have a possibility of growth is because of the unions.
Absolutely.
Without a labor union advocating for the workers, um, many workers in many areas, in many fields, in many different industries would not have the benefits that they have now. So we are a partner to the workers, but we can be a partner to the employers too.
Absolutely. And I think that it's good you know, dismiss those misconceptions that people have. People have many misconceptions about labor unions in the United States, as you pointed out. And so I think, you know, demystifying what it truly means to be part of a labor union is incredible. And that I know that's a huge part of your work. You know, there's been so much talk, I think, since the pandemic began about how to transform the food system, how to have a more fair, just, you know, equal food system. What does the idea of food justice mean to someone like you who's been doing this work for so long? How do you define food justice?
You know, actually, our mission is a safe and just food supply. If we had just have a safe food supply system, people only think of how are they going to get safe food on their tables. But a just system is how we're going to give the opportunity to those who harvest our food to grow, to be able to buy a home, to be able to buy a car, to put their kids through college. I think the justice in it is that they are not in the shadows, um, being thought as second class citizens, which is
Right.
what's happening right now. And just think about it, without our immigrants doing this work, the ag industry in this country would not work, would go under.
Absolutely.
So there is a lot that we are bringing to the table. So now we need to be treated, you know, with just like you said. We need to make sure that we're paid, are earned our vacations, we have benefits, we have medical coverage. We know how important that is in our families.
Right.
And for a union contract, we can get to that.
Absolutely. And the idea of, you know, getting these folks out of the shadows, having their voices heard, because it's not your voice or my voice that needs to be heard. It's their voices and their needs and their, you know, the justice that they actually need to do their jobs very well. What would you tell? I mean, you've talked about the administration so much, and I think for our final question, you know, what do you need as the president of this union to really succeed from the federal government?
You know, talking about collaboration, last year we sat down with several growers organizations, and we sat down with um, representatives of Democratic Congress and Republican to draft an immigration bill for farm workers and their families. For the first time in history, the House passed a bill with, not only for the first time it passed a bill, but it was with bipartisan support.
Right.
We have that bill that we want to be introduced to the Senate as is. We already spent a year negotiating, and when we negotiate, we don't get everything we want. But this will be the ability, when you go in the fields and you talk to a farm worker that says has been here for 20 years and hasn't seen his or her mother for 20 years because cannot travel, it is just cruel.
Right.
So being able to give this legalization to farm workers and their children and their spouses, if they're not in working in the field, would be it would make a huge difference in their lives. And again, I have met with workers here with their families in Mexico, and that to them and to us would be something that it would be transformational.
Right, right, and it's so common sense, right? I mean, it's not like you're asking for the heaven and earth to move. It just makes real sense, and the fact that there's bipartisan support for it, that lawmakers are willing to collaborate on this together and with you, that shows that we still have a little bit of common sense in this country left.
I hope so. I hope so, and I think the fact that we're going through such difficult times and farm workers are still there. The farm workers, even though they're putting themselves at risk, are still there, like our health workers. Right. These are the people that I admire because I'm working from home, but they're there day in and day out.
Literally on the front lines, And I'm glad that they have the support of you. For folks who want more information, they can go to ufw.org. And Teresa, if they want to donate, they can go to the UFW Foundation. Is that correct?
They can go to the UFW Foundation, or they can also donate to the UFW. The difference is that we're not a 501c3, but they can donate to the UFW. We have a history of 60 years where we have hundreds and thousands of donors that have helped us continue with the work that we're doing.
And there's in my opinion and from my admiration of you and UFW, there's really no more important work than what these farm workers are doing and what you're doing to support them. Thank you so much, Teresa. It was a real honor to have you. I hope to meet you in person someday.
I hope so too, Danielle, and thank you very much for having me here today.
Thank you, and everyone stay well. Thank you.